everybody, and welcome to ISHI's first ever South Asia Union Summit led by women. My name is Ekta Kapoor, and I'm the founder and editor of ISHI, which is a digital platform that amplifies women's voices from around the world and stories of our shared humanity. I'm also the founder of South Asia Union, a non-profit initiative that aims to bring together peace builders and particularly women from the region to work towards a political and economic South Asian Union on the lines of the European Union by 2030. Yes, I'm a dreamer. I believe peace makes more sense than war. It costs less and it's more constructive and less traumatizing. It creates a space for growth, socially and economically. It allows progress and justice. And yet, in the past many centuries, humans have consistently put in more time, effort, and resources investing in war and conflict rather than peace. It's more lucrative to stoke conflict and hatred, and it's not so easy or profitable to evoke love and peace. Most peace initiatives like this one are non-profit, but weapons and arms are multi-trillion dollar industries. I often think about why this is so, and I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that it's been men in charge of the world so far. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against men, but if you look at it logically, the idea that half the world's population has hardly any say in running that world doesn't sound right. Just a couple of weeks ago, you may have noticed The Economist carried a cover story on why countries that fail women fail. It found that societies that oppress women, that have sexist family and property laws, high rates of violence against women, and preferences for sons are more likely to be violent and unstable. It also predicted that nation building is not only going to be hard in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq because of these sexist customs, but that stability cannot be taken for granted even in India and Pakistan. So, the South Asia Union Summit led by women is my little attempt at creating a platform, not just for women's leadership, but also to talk courageously about peace, gender equality, and social justice. 50 amazing women from 13 countries have come together over 2 days for talks. The initiative has been made possible by Wiscomp, and I thank my mentors and my biggest supporters, Dr. Sila Elworthy, Dr. Minakshi Gopinath, and Beena Sarwar. Dr. Silla has already inaugurated the summit through a video that she sent from Oxford. And what you're watching now is the very first session. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please feel free to leave your questions and comments for the speakers, and we'll take them up at the end of each session. And now, I'm honored and privileged to introduce our first two speakers for the entire summit, Leslie Adwin and Nandita Das. Hello, Leslie. So happy to have you here. Hello, Nandita.
Hello. Lovely
Hello.
to see you, Leslie.
Lovely to see you, Nandita, my angel. So good to see you. And thank you. Amazing work. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here in this first
Thank
extraordinary
you.
achievement. Ye mera sobhagya hai.
Wonderful. हमारा भी सौभाग्य है. We're also honored to have you here. And of course, both these speakers need no introduction, but I must do the honors, and I'm very honored to do that. So I'll introduce Leslie first. She's a former filmmaker who's now a human rights campaigner and educationist. She's no stranger to awards. As a producer and director, she won the BAFTA Award and numerous others for her impactful films East is East, Who Bombed Birmingham, and of course, India's Daughter, which was about the Nirbhaya case. Her film sparked a global movement to end violence against women, and it also changed the course of Leslie's life. She left filmmaking and founded Think Equal, an NGO that has developed a program to teach social and emotional learning to 3 to 6 year olds worldwide. So far, they have impacted the lives of 166,000 children in 18 countries and have just launched a campaign to fund 68,000 Anganwadis in Rajasthan, reaching 2.5 million children every year. So I'm very happy to
Wow.
have you here, Leslie. It's a real honor. And of course, our second guest is the wonderful Nandita Das. She has acted in more than 40 feature films in 30 languages, 10 different languages. In 2008,
10.
yes, 10. In 2008, she made her directorial debut with Firak, and she's been twice on the jury of the Cannes Film Festival, where she was conferred the Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government. Manto, Nandita's second directorial film, premiered in 2018 and can be watched now on Netflix. Her first book, Manto and I, chronicles her 6 year journey of making the film. A strong advocate for social justice and human rights, Nandita has taken up several issues, including colorism and domestic violence. I'm honored to have you here today, Nandita. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ekta. Thank you.
So I'll start my first question with Leslie. We were talking about how you've launched Think Equal after your experiences with, making the documentary India's Daughter. So what did you learn about society and the patriarchal mindset during the making of India's Daughter that led you to quit filmmaking and to do something else?
Well, I suppose on the most mundane, basic level, what I learned was that filmmaking, always my first love, can beautifully create awareness. But partly as a product of my age, I'm 64 now. And I tell you, I'm very aware of the number of years I've got left. And I just think, how much more awareness do we need? We know what the problems are. We experience the problems, particularly as women, day in, day out. I sat in prison cells for 31 hours, looking into the eyes of men who perpetrate these brutal, appalling crimes against us. And I sat there expecting monsters. And what I found was ordinary, normal human beings. What I discovered was our culpability in what these men do. And we must stop fooling ourselves and believing that these are monsters who are distant from us and nothing to do with us. They are everything to do with us because we have taught them how to think. And in teaching them how to think, we have taught them how to act. So we are part and parcel of that, every single one of us. And when I say every one of us, I mean men, women, policymakers in particular, who deny our children what is their basic right, which is the right to a foundation for positive outcomes in life. I say we deny our children the right by only focusing on numeracy and literacy. We deny them the right to grow up and not rape, the right to grow up and not commit suicide, etc. Now, so basically what I'm saying is that I learned, and this is what made me decide no more films for me, is that films create awareness. They're critically important in doing that. But now is the time for action because I believe our world is hurtling towards catastrophe. You know, H.G. Wells wrote the most haunting sentence, which is, civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And I feel very powerfully, very strongly that we are hurtling towards catastrophe. We're at a point where we're becoming so used to these atrocities. You know, we look at yet another war. You so wisely mentioned, you know, these wars that are man-made. Yes, they are, because men hold the balance of power. Not because men are intrinsically bad, but because men have been programmed to fight battles, not with love or words or debate or inclusiveness, but with divisiveness by pushing people apart from each other based on their differences. Now, I looked into the eyes of these rapists and murderers, and they were taught by us, by sociocultural thinking, that if a girl is out at night after dark, she's fair game. If she's with a boy who's neither her husband nor her brother, she's a slut. And actually, they told me in no uncertain words, Jyoti Singh, Nirbhaya, they said not only deserved what she got, but they said we had a duty to teach her a lesson. Can you imagine that? Remember how stopped in our tracks we were by the horror and the brutality of this act. They actually justified it. They felt no regret, they felt no remorse. One of the rapists I interviewed, a young man called Gaurav, 29, had raped a 5-year-old girl, sat and told me about that for 3 hours without a sense of any regret. And when I said, how on earth could you do that to that fragile, beautiful little human being, knowing you were ruining her life? He said this, word for word. He said, she was a beggar girl. Her life was of no value. We've taught them to think that way. We've taught them about the caste system. We've taught them, as far as colorism is concerned, that white is to be preferred and dark is ugly. And, what do we expect? How do we expect them to behave when we've taught them to think that way? I feel I've overstepped my 5 minutes and I should stop now, but you can hear I've got a lot to say.
We'll come back to that. Yeah, and I think there's a lot to discuss there. I'll actually now like to talk about the same thing to Nandita. I mean, when we are hearing all this, Nandita, it feels like there's something broken in these men. There's something so damaged in their psyche. You're a mother of a young boy. Do you think we as a society and as parents need to allow our boys and men that space to explore their feminine energy in their young age, so that we can sow the seeds of empathy, nurturing, and compassion that seems to be missing in them?
No, absolutely. In fact, before that, I would say that, Leslie, I go through that dilemma often, that is making films even worth it, especially the kinds that we make. I mean, how many people really watch it, and does it really create a change, and how slow is the change when the urgency is sort of looming large? But definitely the seeds of these inequalities or these maladies are also sown, very soon after kids start growing up. So the solution also probably lies there, because that is when we have to create that sense of compassion, that sense of equality. And it's not only about boys or girls. The fact that we genderize so early on, I mean, before, they're children. Why can't we just see them as children? Why can't, as adults also, why can't we see ourselves as human beings? Why does our identity of being a woman sort of supersede all other identities that we also hold? So I think it's very, very important that just as we teach especially in our kind of traditional patriarchal societies, just it's so important to teach women that little girls, that sense of confidence, that sense of freedom, that sense of abandonment, that sense of confidence. Similarly, I think the boys have to be taught a sense of responsibility, a sense of equality, a sense of respect for girls. But how do we do it when the adults who are teaching them themselves are so deeply prejudiced? They themselves are so deeply discriminatory. Then who's going to teach them? So that's why it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. As we change our children. As we become aware, we make our kids aware. I know that when I have these conversations with my child, I mean, he sometimes doesn't understand that why are we even talking about it? Because hopefully the solution lies in this generation, because he just finds it so unbelievable that there would be any kind of difference created between a boy and a girl or a man and a woman. Sometimes when I say, well, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, maybe there were reasons, but why are, in today's time where we are going to the moon and the Mars, why are we still so discriminatory? And he turns back and say, why was it okay 50 years ago? Why was it okay 100 years ago? And I feel that, am I also deeply conditioned to think it was okay maybe 100 years ago, but it's not okay today? So I think every generation has to question it so deeply that what is this coup? Why does 50% of the population that holds up half the sky, why is it left with this shorter end of the stick? Why do we have to constantly justify our actions, our existence? So I think definitely young boys, when they're growing up, when they're seeing all these crazy role models of their fathers sitting on the couch and ordering around and their mothers working, or their little girl is, their younger sisters are working more than they are, that is when the questioning begins. And if we can provide them with some thoughtful things, with some answers, maybe the world would be a different place.
Yes, absolutely. That's so true. Everybody has to take take that step forward. So in fact, Leslie, you've already done that. You've now been involved in developing education systems for little children, and it's been almost 7 years that you've been doing this. Why do you think that the education systems, not just in South Asia, but the whole world, need to ensure gender equality in the curriculums and in the teaching methodology? And how are you doing that through Think Equal?
Okay, so the first thing I need to say is we're doing it mind-blowingly simply and effectively. We have proof. We're evidence-based. We've just had the results of another RCT, randomized control test, which is the gold standard of evaluations, from Australia. And the results in Australia were as powerful as the results in Botswana. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings all over the world. We are the same human beings. Now, Nandita's point, critically important point, is really what struck me between the eyes when I realized what needs to be done, when I realized that what we're dealing with here is a broken education system, which was designed in and for the Industrial Revolution and has not changed since. Actually, the education system is the most antiquated of all of our systems. Everything else seems to have developed, but education not at all. And it was developed in order to create a trajectory to the labor market for our children, right? So it teaches numeracy, literacy. There's a missing subject. It is that very missing subject that changes the mindset of the next generation so that they grow up without these discriminations. And it's easy to do, and it's plug and play, and it costs 200 rupees per child, not per year, not per month, for the rest of their lives, okay? The real question I had to ponder was the one that Nandita posed, which is this critical thing of how are you going to get adults who are discriminating and have not had the benefit of learning this new subject to teach the subject, which hasn't even existed yet. So it's brand new. Nobody knows anything about how to teach it, and they are stuck with their discriminations and prejudices. How are they going to teach it to children? Prescriptively is the answer. So here we have, developed by the world's top thought leaders in education, psychology, neuroscience, and human rights. I gathered together a team of 22 within 3 months of finishing the film. I had gathered together Sir Ken Robinson, our founding patron, the greatest educationalist the world has ever known, without any comparison. Dr. Mark Brackett, Dr. Robin Stern from Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence, Dr. Urvashi Sani from Lucknow, who is an expert at empowering girls through education. I gathered together 22 experts, and together for 3 years, we developed the prescriptive program, the 90 lesson plans in each level, bullet point by bullet point. These are instructions for the teachers to follow. And they're not about put this piece of information into the child's head. That never works. This is co-created learning on the pedagogical model of Maria Montessori, who, like us, sees children as the agents of social change. And what we do quite simply with those lesson plans, with these resources, all of which, teach our children everything. This I've got to show you in a second, Nandita, because this cures any notion of colorism as one resource of, hundreds that we teach. Books, critically important. Nandita, and I do from filmmaking, that the only way we can mediate empathy and teach it and develop empathetic neuropathways is through character and story. There is no other way. We have to grab their
Absolutely.
little hearts, right, and squeeze them.
True.
And if we simply wag a finger at our children or even adults and say, put yourself in that person's shoes, it's meaningless. That's theoretical. It's a thought trick. But you need to feel it, you need to care. So we have all these books. Yoshi is different. Fessel's not himself. This is about a little boy who can't express his emotions, right? Etc. Tabo and the Trees. It's global. It's from all over the world. Rainbows in Windows, which we created with the World Health Organization to help our children with the COVID traumas, mental health challenges, etc., etc. Now, basically, what we do is we give the teachers everything they need, the tools to co-create pro-social neuropathways in the developing brains of our children. We can only do this between the ages of 3 and 6. That is not to write off anyone above the age of 6. It is merely to say that after 6, neuroscientists are absolutely clear now. The pathways are fixed after 6, and then you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and therapy to undo what has been learned in the wrong way and relearn. What is wrong with us human beings? Why can't we just spend that 200 rupees per child and stop neglecting our duty of care to our children? They need well-being. They need to know how to respect and value each other. That is how we do it. We've now, by the way, reached our 19th country, and I know I gave you the information about 18 countries and 166,000 children. We're now, every week, we just burgeon. We've just joined Pakistan as our 19th country. It's
That's
working.
great.
It's amazing.
Excellent. Excellent. And like we were discussing, having having a gender equal world, it doesn't have to be expensive. It just needs a certain will. And in fact, you both have are filmmakers. You've Nandita, of course, has been making amazing movies. She's been acting and directing amazing movies. So coming to that, Nandita, you've been an advocate for women's rights through your films and through your activism. But every time if there's a new case of violence against women, we notice that parents and community leaders, political leaders, they come out with even more and more restrictions for girls and women. But don't you think it's about time that the solutions for the issue of gender violence and women's safety should now start focusing on men instead of restricting women more and more?
Well, I think that's been, in fact, a big problem in the whole feminist movement as well. That even the feminists that open doors for people like us actually focus so much on women, and I think it's natural. The people who are suffering, the people who are quieter. There is a culture of silence. So you first say that, listen, you've got to break that culture of silence. You've got to start asking questions. You've got to sort of speak to power. You've got to know your rights. So a lot of work happened on women, and what it has done, it's actually further skewed it, because women are now asking questions. Women are not taking things lying down as much they probably did, and the gap is actually increasing because no work has really happened with boys and men, and therefore they are suddenly sort of stumped almost that what has happened. I mean, marriages are breaking. There are far more divorces now than there were probably ever before, which doesn't mean that the marriages were better before. It's just that more and more women are sort of questioning the institution of marriage, and realizing that there are subtle and blatant inequalities that exist in that institution. So therefore there is this lopsidedness, and definitely there is a great need to work with men, because like Leslie said, you said that this is not against men. In fact, feminism doesn't really have a gender. Anyone can be a feminist, as long as you believe in that equality, as long as you believe that men and women have the same rights, the same emotions, the same desires, you are a feminist. So the work with men is in fact crucial, because till then, like Leslie has as well said, that we are all complicit. And we are the ones, as a society, we are creating this violence, and women have to take as much responsibility as men have to in creating this change. In fact, it's tragic that when somebody is a victim, whether it's in a caste issue, or whether it's in a gender issue, or if it's a religious minority, whatever the case may be, whoever is the victim is having to find the strength to make that change. Those, in fact, who are more powerful, those who are more privileged, if they felt that, yes, I mean, even though I have all the power and the privilege, I don't really deserve it, or it needs to be shared. It's not about even allowing each other, but actually believing that there is merit and equality as a society. When they start participating, the change will be greater. And we do have some allies in men. It's not like there are no allies. There are spouses, and in fact, there was a study which said a woman reaches her full potential either when she's single, or if she has a supremely, and supremely was in red, bold, and caps, that it has a supremely supportive, partner. So definitely, if we have to grow further, if our children have to be more sensitive, we definitely have to start, in fact, with boys and men. There's no question about it. And we have already failed for too long. So this could be the next chapter of feminism, is to engage with men, allow them to speak about how they feel, share what we are actually feeling, and create a space of vulnerability so that the true emotions can find a place to be expressed. Hello?
Ekta, you're on mute.
The whole idea of
Ekta,
denying men this huge side, this huge emotional gap in their lives, that itself, it's creating so many psychological issues. And like Leslie was saying, these, the men who commit crimes against women, they're damaged in such ways that it's after years, it'll take years of therapy for them to actually start empathizing with the female. Within them, and the female outside them as well. So
And they're committing
yeah,
suicide, Ekta.
and many lives
yeah,
will go till then. I mean, many
yes,
lives
absolutely,
will be, yeah, scarred by the time they realize it. We
Yeah,
can't
and they're
afford to
committing
have. That's why there is a sense of urgency.
in
Sorry.
droves. They're committing suicide like lemmings off cliffs. It's the number one killer of young men where I come from in the UK. That suicide is the number one killer of young men, more than cancer, more than drugs, more than drink, more than so we're also doing this to our boys. It's not just as Nandita so beautifully said, we're all human beings. We care about every single one of us. This isn't just for women and against men. It's it's everyone we have to care for.
yeah, and it's patriarchy hurts both. It's harmful for women, of
Absolutely.
course, and the ones who are non-conforming to certain gender binaries. But it also hurts, I think, men the most, because they cannot access this huge this huge part of themselves, their humanity. Actually, now there's this huge discussion in the world about a lot more the topics of transgenderism and things coming up. I was just wondering, I mean, maybe Nandita as a mother can talk about the idea of being a little more gender fluid, gender neutral in our language with our children, and allowing them, to sort of, express themselves, even as little boys express their feminine side, and even as girls express their masculine side. I mean,
Absolutely.
somehow the culture of tomboys, we've had it for a while, like girls who behave like boys, kind of people turn a blind eye, and they're like, okay, she's just a tomboy. But if a boy was to do that, if a boy was to behave like, quote unquote, like a girl, I mean, there are a lot more barriers for boys to explore their feminine side. I mean, what do you think? I mean, as a parent, what would you say to that?
No, that's true, because we have also stereotyped. We put them in boxes. When my son was really small and I would go to a toy shop and they would say, okay, if I wanted to buy something, they would say, boy or girl? I'm like, he's
Yeah,
4. How does it even matter whether it's
yeah,
boy or girl? So the girl had all the, glitzy stuff and sewing and stitching, and the boys had the cars and the Legos, and as if girls can't play. So, what I had said earlier also, this genderization. But I think this generation, I don't know. I mean, when I remember going to a restaurant and there was a transgender who was serving us, and my son was looking at their painted nails and, sort of a bright red lipstick or something. So I thought maybe this was a good time to start a conversation. And we talked about how sometimes you can be trapped in a male body and, you could feel like a woman. And he didn't even bat an eyelid. He said, of course, it's their choice. And I realized that maybe I was burdening more, like how do I talk to him so that he's more sensitive to it. But if I think you just give them the right atmosphere, children are not as judgmental as we adults are. So even, I mean, we need far more unlearning than I think if we give the right atmosphere to children, and where we are not constantly saying this is what a boy does, this is what a girl does, when they have friends who are girls and boys, and we stop using those words that maybe there's so much of unconscious bias that we as adults sometimes don't know the language that we use and how it can be harmful and how it further stereotypes. So I'm very hopeful of this generation, or I don't know, maybe it's a smaller pool, those who are maybe more exposed. But kids naturally are not judgmental. How do they know these binaries? How do they understand this fluidity? Because they start slowly hearing, don't cry like a girl. Sometimes a relative says something like that to my son, and my son quite easily in fact cries, if he feels sad. And then he would turn around and say that, once he was losing a game, and I said, it's just a game, why are you crying? He said, when somebody wins, you always congratulate the person and everybody celebrates. Obviously you're going to feel bad if you lose. And I realized that's so true. Even though I was being very, as a conscious parent, I was trying to talk about failures as, just something that happens and it's part of the game. You shouldn't think of it as winning or losing. But when somebody wins, we still are happy and say, oh, you won. Okay, that's great. That means the learning we have to do is that when somebody wins, we have to be just as as neutral as we can when somebody loses. Children are constantly asking questions and finding that out. So we have to first really figure out our own prejudices. Till we don't address, and I feel very strongly about it, I made sure that I gave my son dolls and kitchen sets and everything that we played together without even telling him, oh, this is what girls usually do, and look, I'm giving it to a boy. There is no great sort of a big value attached to it. It should be just as normal as you play with cars. Or in fact, he didn't even play that much with cars, but he used to love building. And like today, he does cube and he does chess. And so many times I see educated parents saying, oh, that's like a cool boy doing cubes and chess. And he says, my daughter, she would never get into it. And by saying that my daughter will not get into it, maybe even if she wanted to try it out, probably she wouldn't. So we also, every time we say something that's very genderized, I think we have to catch ourselves. We ourselves have to ask ourselves that, is it because I'm preconditioned to thinking that this is what a boy must do and this is what a girl must do? So there's a lot of work that we need to do. And with work like what Leslie is doing, maybe the children, even with this prescriptive teaching, maybe the children finally will teach the teachers something which will have more depth, and the teachers will start questioning their bias and prejudices.
The
Yeah,
children
Leslie, do
are.
you want to add to that from
Yes,
the
please.
educator's point of view?
Please,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
this is very important. Look, the children are teaching the parents.
I'm sure.
The question is, I think what we have to be really realistic about is this. Nandita, you are one of the most admirable, intelligent, brilliant, caring human beings I know.
Oh, please.
Of course,
Thank you, Leslie.
no, but this is important because, of course, your son is going to be learning all of these critically important things, that all emotions are okay. There's no bad in feeling
Absolutely.
upset that I've lost. There's no bad in feeling angry. There's no bad. All feelings are okay. This is what we teach the children, right? In Think Equal. But how many parents are like you, Nandita, in the world? Very, very, very few. So the bottom line is, here's my absolute, what I've come to believe with every fiber of my being is this. It's not that parents can't change. It's not that they can't catch themselves
True.
using this prejudiced language, but it's going to take decades for them to change because they're programmed. This is the point. The way the brain works, brain architecture works with neuropathways. Those neuropathways are formed through habit, through repetition, through rehearsal, and through experiential. You experience something, it strengthens that neuropathway. If you have never experienced empathy, you cannot become an empathetic human being later in life. You just can't.
Absolutely.
You don't have that pathway. So what I'm saying is we have to stop, for me personally, putting our efforts, our time, our massive money into therapy and prison cells, for God's sake, right? And we have to divert a little bit of that into creating a next generation that doesn't need to relearn its prejudiced outlook, because it is too much effort and it is too unrealistic to expect that the teachers and the parents and the adults will change. One of our audience members, I think Shakshila, forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, you said it has to begin at
Shashikala.
home. Shashikala, you said it has to begin at home. It can't begin at home. It can't, because how are you going to teach that mother who may well be being beaten by that father, or at least being disrespected and told, make my dinner, whatever it is? How are you going to teach that mother to begin at home? And how are you going to do that on the scale of billions of human beings? It cannot begin at home. We have to get real about this. It can only begin with a fresh mind. That is a clean slate, where you teach that child the right things, okay? You teach that child that when they call this girl here white, or they call me white, if this girl is white, what color is the paper at the side of her portrait then? That's white. She's not white. When we call this little girl here black, what color's her hair then? She's not black. When we take a little crayon with our children, a brown crayon, and we fill in light brown and dark brown and black and white, and we put these little daubs of color against these portraits, what do we discover? We discover that this girl is not black, she's dark brown. This girl here is not white, she's light brown. These colors match exactly. So now we know every human being on the planet is brown. We're just different shades of brown. Now, it's as simple as that to teach a human being to stop being divisive, to stop being colorist and saying black and white. And why is that important? Nandita will tell you why that's important. Because colorism leads women to rip their faces apart with chemicals, etc. And the minute these kids start growing up and using metaphoric language, they're starting to learn about the black heart of the villain. Black male, the black sheep in the family, the black mark against your name.
Yeah.
Everything black is negative. How do we expect these children to have any self-esteem when they're dark? You know, we cannot simply say to our parents, tell the children it's okay to be dark, because it's not going to work. We have to teach the children it's okay to be dark. We have to teach the girls from 3 to 6 that they can do anything they want and dream of. And we have to teach the boys that everyone is equal, regardless of religion or race or gender, etc. And for me, sorry, I get so categoric, and I apologize with all my heart. Please forgive me. I know it's not a nice state, but I can't help it because I'm so utterly convinced, and I've seen it with the power of my own eyes. I've seen children go home. I've seen parents come to the teachers and say, this thing with the colors that teaches us about the emotions, where can I get one? And I've seen the children teach the parents. It works. It happens.
Definitely.
Yeah. Nandita, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I just want to say, even about colorism, for instance, I mean, whether it's discrimination based on gender or caste or color or religion, what it really attacks is your sense of self. So when you do all of this, what you're really killing is a sense of self, and that has an impact throughout your life. Because if you don't have a comfortable, a good, a healthy sense of self-esteem, it's going to be the biggest roadblock. So when we stereotype or when we label people, that you're a dark person and you're a fair, and glorify one color and put down the other, what you're really doing is crushing that sense of self. So everything is so tied in. I mean, there are so many intersectionalities of all of these things that we are talking about, and that's why it's also important that we work at a larger level. So while we may be working on gender, we're also working on color, we may also be working on caste, we may be working on race, we may be working on religion. So that kind of understanding for the educators to have, for parents to have, for teachers to have, is very important. But we've created a society where we don't value teachers. I mean, teachers is like, if you don't get any work, then you become a teacher. And and that's why all caregiving professions are all sort of kept for women, whether you're nurses or you're school teachers or you're government school teachers. That those are some of the only professions where there are more women, because it's seen as a part-time thing. It's not given the value. Caregiving as such is not given the respect it deserves. So I think that also needs to change. Our own perceptions about people who are not just who are caring, who are teaching, who are educators, we as a society need to elevate them. We need to celebrate them. We need to respect them so that they can then create those transformations that we are talking about. So I just thought I'll add that, because it really hurts that teachers are sort of so marginalized in just the hierarchy of professions that we see in a society, and yet we talk about education being so important without the educator being given the due respect.
Yeah,
Couldn't
and I
agree
think,
more.
and I
And
think,
also,
yeah,
teachers hold the future in their hands. They are the single most important profession,
Exactly.
and especially the ones who are treated with complete derision, thought to be at the bottom of the heap, the babysitters who are with the
Absolutely.
3 to 6 year olds. That's when the human being is being created. I mean, get real. Yeah.
that is so important.
Exactly.
And I think both of you are, using whatever platforms you have to try and create as much awareness. Uh, it's a learning experience for all of us. We learn as we go along, and we use whatever means we have to spread that knowledge. So thank you both for the wonderful work that you do. And I wish we could talk more, but we have a long day of sessions ahead of us. There's going to be
I'm
sessions
sure.
every hour. And we have amazing speakers, even in our next session, and the sessions after that for the next 2 days. So thank you both for
Well,
being
all the
here.
best for it. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you for the amazing work you do. And yeah, we'll be in touch and we'll have more conversations about this in the future. Thank you,
Nandita,
everybody.
Sure.
मुझे तुमसे बहुत
Thank you.
प्यार है, नंदिता.
मुझे भी है, Leslie. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank
All the
you.
best
Bye
for your
bye.
work. Bye.
You
Thank
Bye
you.
too,
bye.
darling.
Bye.